Welcome. I'm JuQuay, and this is the Big Ideas That Matter podcast, where we explore the question, why this big idea now? Because education isn't just about schooling, it's about shaping how people see themselves, each other, and the world. From democracy to equity, from classrooms to communities, the ideas we invest in or ignore define our collective future. We're joined by a powerhouse group of thinkers and leaders who live this work every day. Together, we'll unpack how education can reclaim its role as a driver of transformation and what it takes to keep big ideas alive in practice, in policy, and public will. Today, we're taking on a foundational one: why big ideas matter and how education can transform society with today's guests. We welcome to the Big Ideas That Matter podcast, episode 1, Dr. Rodney Hopson, the Dean of the School of Education here at American University, Dr. Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy, CEO, President of American Association of Colleges of Teacher and Education, a leading voice on educational policy and equity, and the former Dean of the School of Education here at AU, and Dr. Jordy Sparks, Executive Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Student Supports at Oceanside School Districts in California. I thank you all for joining us, and we're going to get started. We're going to dive right in. We start here always with what's giving you hope right now. Dr. Hobson.
Absolutely. How long do I have? Because this could be a long story. Wait. I have hope. I have hope.
Keep it to a minute.
Keep it to a minute. This month brought a lot of change. Just thinking about the month of October, and one of the things that I was able to do that kept me from both government shutdown blues and just keeping hope was visiting for 3 consecutive weeks with our field experience first and second years, the local and neighborhood schools in Washington D.C. So for 3 mornings in October at about 8 or so, I'd meet the group and we'd be visiting schools in the area, middle school, Howard University, elementary school, Plummer Elementary School, in Southeast, and then Bishop McNamara High School. And so seeing our young people and seeing the eyes of the other young people in school, that gave me a lot of hope.
All righty, thank you. And next, we'll hear from Dr. Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having this forum on big ideas. I love this kind of conversation. I think we need to do this more often, come together around the future of education and talking about big ideas and how to actually implement those ideas. Um, you know, we've experienced such darkness in education over the last 9, 10 months. From the termination of grant funding to anti DEI work, the academic freedom or freedom of speech being threatened, and it goes on and on and on. But throughout all of those really tough moments over the past 10 months, um, aspiring educators or future educators still show up at their programs. They're still interested in going into education, where this is almost very much related to what Dr. Hobson just said. They're still showing up excited and actually inspired to do even more, right? And I am constantly just amazed that the young educators and everyone seems young these days to me when
Mhm.
I think about coming to education, but um, they are excited. They are ready to be advocates. They talk about issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion anyway. They're not they're courageous, and they're stepping up. And I am so hopeful when I'm around young, new, novice educators. And we often talk about teacher shortages. And I do a lot of talking around the country about reclaiming the narrative around education, that we have to, teacher shortages, learning loss, all of those issues are important challenge. They're important topics for us to address. However, we sometimes forget in those conversations how powerful education is and how foundational it is to our democracy. And we forget all of those teachers that show up every day, no matter what, millions of teachers and educators that, despite all this noise around them, they walk into buildings and they teach and they love children. And I think um, that gives me hope, because there are these amazing educators everywhere that continue to be heroes and sheroes, and show up every day and do all the extra things that we know that educators do. And I think it's time that we celebrate that,
Yeah.
because that can give us the type of hope that we need to get through this challenging time. So that's what gives me hope, is all those people that show up every day, and aspiring educators who are really excited about coming into our profession.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. And then Dr. Jordy Sparks.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I think everything that Dr. Holcomb-McCoy just said gives me hope. So I could just say yes to everything she just shared. But just a couple things that came to mind specifically today. There was a ruling from the Supreme Court that is upholding same-sex marriage, which I think impacts a lot of our families, students, the identities that they see and bring to our classrooms every day. And so, to me, that was encouraging and positive and hopeful. I'm looking for hopeful news like that each and every day, and that was nice to wake up to that. I also think that this notion of folks fighting for a democracy to keep our democracy, to me, gives me hope.
Mm.
I heard someone the other day from visiting from another country who said, we used to look to the U.S. for our example of democracy, and now, we're not so sure about that anymore. And I had to interject. It wasn't my conversation, but I had to interject and say, hey, we're doing the most democratic thing we can possibly do, which is to fight for our democracy and try to keep it to
Okay.
serve all people. And so I'm still seeing glimmers of that, especially to Dr. Holcomb McCoy's point, when you interact with people who are committing to the education profession. I see that happening a lot. And then finally, I would say what gives me hope is conversations like these, the fact that people aren't shying away from these sorts of conversations, that um, we're not necessarily obeying in advance and deciding to not talk about issues of equity and issues of inclusion and issues of justice. But we know that as long as we're working in the business of people, that there's going to always be DEI work. And so I appreciate conversations like these. They always give me a hope, and I agree that we should do them more often.
Yes. So thank you all for sharing what's giving you hope, from teachers still showing up to visiting the classrooms, seeing not only the teachers' faces, but the students' faces,
Mm.
and rulings that are upholding the things that we know are true and dear and right to our hearts. So thank you all for sharing those points. It is asking what's giving you hope. It's our way of tapping into our collective resilience before we dive deep into each episode's topic. And so we thank you all for engaging with us through that. And so now we are going to get into our topic of why big ideas matter now and transforming society through education. And so, with that, my first question is, why do big ideas still matter in this moment of uncertainty? Right? You all have hit on some of those moments and points of uncertainty, but why do big ideas, particularly around education, still matter in this moment of uncertainty? And we'll go back and we'll start with Rodney.
Excellent. I think the first thing is, and not to be cliche, again, thank you all for being here as part of this. as well. I didn't properly do my good propers, but maybe before we end. I think one, and again, not to be cliche, it's why universities matter, why public education matters, why higher education matters. The idea of big ideas is that we matter in education, and so when Jordy was speaking as well, it just reminds me about our why. You know, it's connected as a school of education. This is you all. This is our why. And so, not to be cliche about it, but also part of it is also sort of these settings of being in classrooms and having conversations, and finding spaces of higher learning. We learn not to believe misinformed data about the value of higher education. For instance, um, I'll just refer to both the Georgetown Center. Uh, University Center on Education and on Center on Education and the Workforce, Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce numbers, just speaking about the number of more workers needed for post-secondary education in the next decade or so. The number of hiring managers, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, that say that high school students are not prepared to enter the workforce. And so there's a value, and not to believe the misinformed information around that. And maybe I can come back to that, but also just and I'll also refer to another bit of data that's out there that Vanderbilt Project on American Democracy recently put out results in a couple of months ago, and I think part of it was related to understanding the public confidence of higher education, like considering the conversations, are people really feeling the same way about education? And I think part of it revealed in that survey that, and I'll just go through a few things. Um, while Americans offer modest support for higher education, confidence in public universities is substantially higher than in private counterparts. Support for foreign students transcends party lines, but sentiment around President Donald Trump's handling of the issue remains polarized. Confidence in personal financial outlook is shaky, uh, with most Americans feeling Trump's tariffs will impact them negatively. The and so part of it, and there's more there that speaks to the sort of the perception of higher education and the focus on education, especially elite universities, and what does it mean? But that there's still and so part of that data, I think, to me, speaks to um, one, the general approval across the general public of higher education, but also recognizing that across multiple, sort of seeing the data across party lines reveals something. Not that all Democrats say the same thing and all those Republicans say the thing, that, but even variance within those groups, and why. And so I think there's some data out there that speaks on the fact that public education in generally is still being confident, there's folks still feeling confident, as well as in higher education generally. And so just being aware that those sort of narratives, I mean, I think Dr. Holcomb-McCoy is speaking to just making sure we reclaiming that narrative about the benefit of education is still there. And I can come back to more, but I'll start there.
And then, Cheryl, do you have anything to add? Why do big ideas still matter, especially in moments of uncertainty like we're living in today?
Well, and I agree with everything Dr. Hobson just outlined for us. I think, overall, I mean, this time of uncertainty really is an inflection point about the future, right? That um, I we can, we can easily say that I think, and I can make this assumption. I have no research. It's just my theory on this is that um, as our nation grows and coming out of the pandemic, in which education, higher ed, and K-12 pivoted to virtual learning, we learned that we can educate using technology. Um, we also learned a lot about ourselves and our infrastructure and where we can save money, where we can't, and the
Yeah.
costs. I mean, we've gone through um, major changes, and now we have this administration. that is questioning the value of higher ed, but also saying we need to totally restructure the way we do education and dismantling the federal Department of Education and this notion that we're going to go back to states and that states can do all of this magical work. Um, but underneath that is this are these questions of how do we address issues of inequity or the fact that children aren't learning as much as they should. I mean, that's the bottom line is that when we look at NAEP scores or whatever type of assessment instrument, we know that there are inequities. We know that there are children that have access to a better education than others based on zip code, based on place, based on circumstance. Um, and we also know that we have some big challenges just in the way that we function as a country. All of this, I think, um, pushes us for change. And where we are right now in this sense of uncertainty, I tend to reframe that and look at that this is also a time of possibility. So, and when I say that, that means that it's an opportunity for us to bring people together to create the answers or solutions to some of these long standing challenges that we've had in education. So instead of the uncertainty is true, I don't necessarily agree with this administration and their approach. But by golly, it's opening up an opportunity for us to rethink, restructure, and to think about education in a different way. Future classrooms are not going to look like they did in 1974 when I was in elementary school and you sit in rows and you have your little desk and a teacher's, whatever.
Hmm.
No technology beyond a TV. I mean, there was a big debate about whether or not you should have TV in a classroom then,
Yeah.
right? Now we're talking about AI, right? Artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
And students expect to have technology. I mean,
Yeah.
this is their world.
Hmm.
So I say all this to say that in this time of uncertainty, what better time is it than to think about big ideas? This is the time we should be thinking about big
Yes.
ideas, right?
Hmm.
Um, I'm old enough to remember the stories about when, the Russians were a threat and we thought they were going to get on the moon and do all these crazy things to the United States. And immediately everyone started thinking about education. We have to get these scientists
Yes.
in place so that we can be on the moon before other countries. So I do think whenever there's this uncertainty or threat, there's a larger need for education. That's why I think this is our moment for us. I think we shouldn't shirk from thinking about big ideas. Now we need to have the big ideas and we need to act on them. And people see the urgency of it now more than ever because they feel it. Um, so I think this is the best time. So with uncertainty comes the opportunity for change, the opportunity for growth, becomes possibility. And so, if we don't take advantage of this moment, someone will come in and tell us what we
Hmm.
need to do with education. You better believe that.
Yeah.
They'll see a wide open space that they can monetize and do all these things in education that aren't necessarily good for children and families and communities. So, this is our moment, I think, in education to claim it and to move on the big ideas that we know and feel pretty certain that many more families will get an opportunity to thrive. So this is it.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love that. And yet, yes, classrooms look so different. I mean, even from when I was in class, I mean, all students now have their own laptops. I'm like, the schools are giving out laptops?
Yeah, yeah.
Man, that would have been, granted, I guess laptops weren't a thing when I were in school. We still had the big chunky Macs with the dial up, but
Well, we have a computer with us all the time, our phones.
right, right, right. They look so different. So yes, agreed, agreed.
All that
And
information in the phone, boy, that is like
really
our computers that we take with us everywhere. Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Cheryl's getting me inspired to jump in as well. I know Jordy wants to get in.
yeah, I was gonna say let Jordy get in.
No, go
Yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
Jordy, get yours in because I want to come back and just say
Yeah.
something about some
Yes.
things.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate this conversation. Like I said earlier, I think to me, um, uncertainty it taps into innovation and curiosity, but it also taps into scarcity and self preservation. So it's kind of like you have a choice right now to kind of like go one way or the other, and to kind of like leverage and use the energy that exists when things feel uncertain. So I think, in terms of the work that I do, and colleagues that I work with, and the work that y'all do, leadership matters greatly in terms of creating the conditions for big ideas to flourish,
Mhm.
and to show up in real, tangible ways. I'm thinking of a leadership definition that I've always subscribed to. Someone who is a mentor and teacher of mine, but also is an organizer and a lecturer at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and he said that leadership is his name is Marshall Gans. He said leadership is accepting responsibility to enable others to achieve a shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. And I feel like that definition of leadership is always applicable, and especially applicable right now as people are experiencing real day to day uncertainty, and really trying to figure out like what's next. Whether it's day to day, what am I going to do to help provide food for my family, to day to day like what's public education going to look like on the other side of all this. But like I said, I think that our responsibility is to make sure that big ideas show up in real, tangible ways. And I'm thinking of things like big ideas like equity, belonging, democracy. Like they can feel abstract,
Yeah.
but in public education, they actually take form every day. And like who feels seen, who has voice, who has access.
Yeah.
And I think holding on to those big ideas reminds us that like the purpose of schooling isn't just academic success. It's also about shaping a society where everybody counts.
Yes.
And the more that I interact with, to Dr. Holcomb-McCoy's earlier point, the more I interact with like newer teachers and students who are currently in school, this idea of being in a society where everyone counts, I think it's a society that more and more people, especially young folks, are interested in each and every day. I think you actually saw some of that in like the recent, elections that happened.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
these big ideas, like they sound abstract, but they're actually like real tangible things that I think we can accomplish in our classrooms, whether it's K through 12 or post secondary.
Yeah.
Well, again, you inspire me because it's sometimes when these big idea spaces sort of remind us sometimes that it could be the table, the kitchen table. It could be around the fire. It becomes a place by which we have a forward to chat, have a forward to build capacities, and we know that this moment is but a moment that we're sort of facilitating some sort of if I use the same analogy, Jordy, we're at the table we're eating, but we know that the work has to go when we leave the table. Like I'm getting inspired by these things because of what we're doing here. So big ideas as a forward to chat, as a forward to build capacities to move and inspire collectively, check on one another and see how things are going in California with things there. I see even on the back of your wall, I see King and is that Ida B. Wells? That's a really famous picture of two warriors in social justice that have inspired a lot of us. So
Yeah.
that's it. I mean, with the history of big ideas, I just want to just put a plug with something under the leadership of Dean Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy when she was here during COVID that really helped us to think through. This was then. What were the larger systemic ideas that we were facing at a moment of COVID, and
Yeah.
so we have a colleague who's Kenja Watson who speaks about a moment right now of polycrises. Like, well, then how do we move now post COVID in these polycrises moment?
Yeah.
And so in multiple states, I mean, you got a militarization going on in the federal city here in Washington, D.C., but it's also taking multiple forms in different places, right? It's not the same here as it is, let's say, in Chicagoland or in Portland. So those things look different. And what does that mean when we interact that as school leaders and as education leaders in these environments? How do we prepare community to be in these spaces as well? I mean, what are the effects of these this sort of federalization of National Guard and so forth. And what does that mean? And so, how do we process that even in classrooms in schools? And so, That sort of drives me to think about why these big ideas are so important.
Okay. And so, Rodney, with all of that you were speaking to, from your vantage point, leading AU School of Education, what do you see as the big idea that's shaping education right now? Like, what are people bringing to the table? What are they taking away?
Y-
What was what is the big idea taking?
Yeah, no, I'll just say these three things briefly, and I think we've summed them up somewhat, and I'll just come back to them. But these were the things that I had. One is this sort of a frontal attack, a front assault on higher education, and the elevation of higher education as part of a problem which seems unprecedented in my lifetime. Um, and I'm just 60. But I mean, how is that this all of a sudden we became part of a problem, not as a solution, but a problem? And so of course, there's some antecedent with our current vice president noted for saying death to universities. Like, where did that come from?
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
that, and then the harbinger of a set of responses around science research, DEI, with the Cruz report. Maybe we can talk about that. And then the second thing is redrawing of what it means to be educated and what we value as curricula to drive schooling. So these issues
Yeah,
come
yeah.
about around affordability, the confidence in higher education as a successful model of social uplift, the role of international students as a global engine. Like, where did all that? So that, and then third is the sort of what the reframing of what it means to be American, especially in recasting of civil rights, the hemorrhaging of all things DEI, the challenges of the words etched on the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Is that's meeting a current sort of challenge at the moment. That those etched that etched those etched words are seemingly amidst the changing demographic of who's going to universities and who can afford. There's a few constellations around some of those points that we can go into more detail, but I'll just say those three for now.
Okay. Thank you for that. And given those three things that Rodney just shared, Cheryl, you're at the intersection of policy and practice. And so, given these ideas that Dean Rodney sees moving and taking shape and being questioned, what do you see on your side, that what makes it hard for these big ideas like equity and culturally responsive teaching, these types of things, move from theory to sustainable policy and then practice?
Yeah, I'll give you one example. At American University, when we had a big idea or a dream that we were going to create an anti-racist school of education and what that meant. It's a big idea. First of all, having to define what anti-racism means and then operationalize that to be in every aspect of our operations as a school of education was a really big idea. And I think the what were some of the barriers within that big idea? Well, first of all, fear. So, whenever you have a big idea and you're redefining something, whether it be an institution, a way in which you're doing something, people tend to fear the unknown. And so they rather stay with something that they feel isn't good for them, but they know it, right? They understand it, they have lived it. Might not feel good, but it's familiar. And so I do think the first hurdle for any big idea is the fear of change and how it will impact the people that have to go about that change. So fear is huge, and overcoming that. And as leaders, speaking of what Jordy was saying, leadership is so important in any big change because leaders have to be fearless. They have to be mission driven, values driven. They have to really believe in whatever that big idea is and see it when others can't. And then lead in a way that it will be able to get people to come with you, right?
Hmm.
And I see now when we think about big ideas in higher education, we have a few leaders that were able to see, for instance, the damage that some of what this administration was doing, and they stood up. They could see beyond what people could see in the very beginning.
Mm,
So the special leadership, if you're going to have a big idea, is critical. The second, implementation without infrastructure, that was huge. So when we were thinking about this anti-racist school, um, to implement that would mean that we need someone that is thinking about all those little things that would just, that no one's thinking of, that will come up. Who's going to help us manage those things, like a syllabus, or
Yeah.
the dynamics between faculty based on race or gender identity? Who's going to be the one that's going to help people come together? Actually, that's how Dr. Fisher came about. We needed that
Yeah.
infrastructure. And so we hired someone that we thought could actually help us in that implementation, but that we needed funding for the infrastructure. Oftentimes, we have big ideas and we're trying to implement, but we don't have the infrastructure or the funding or the way to do it right. So I would say that's another reason why, that's another barrier with big ideas. And then often, these big ideas are dependent upon the people or a budget cycle or who can fight for whatever. And, in K-12 districts, often it's who's the mayor or who's sitting on the school board that you're going to get funding for something, a big idea, but it only lasts as long as that person is sitting on the school board,
Hmm.
or is
Hmm.
the superintendent, or is the dean, or is. So sustainability of big ideas is also huge, and often is dependent upon the people. We got to get away from the people. It has to be institutionalized so that it will live on. We also, as leaders, have to think beyond the day today. We have to think to the future and start building infrastructure that is sustainable. If we don't do that, then the big ideas will crash, quickly, very quickly, because there is nothing holding them up. But I would say the big piece, again, I keep going back to this, is
mm,
fear of cultural change, fear of change.
mm,
It's a huge barrier. And if you can get beyond the fear and start tapping into your courageousness and your knowing that this is what is needed for this moment, then everything else will kind of follow, and to have some strategy for moving forward. But we often don't have that luxury, with our big ideas.
mm,
Yes.
mm,
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then this ties into Jordy as a district leader, right? How do you then translate these ideas into daily decisions as a leader, right? And having to lead fearlessly and get others to lead fearlessly, and sometimes implementing without the infrastructure or the power. Um, how do you then incorporate that into the daily decisions, especially when the policy and the politics don't align with what's best for the students?
mm,
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think a couple of things. One, this notion of fear is real, and I was thinking a lot about the word courage when Cheryl brought it up, because I also think that like sometimes you have to do stuff scared, and
mm.
it
Maybe
doesn't.
that's courage.
I love
I mean,
that.
yeah. So like
I
that's
love
kind of
that.
like that's what's coming to mind for me is like there are times when it's like risky to do what you know you need to do, what comes next, but um, it's riskier and even scarier to not do it. Um, so I was thinking, just like to me, public education, I've always seen it as a democratic act, and I think democracy requires courage. You know, as we've been talking about the intersection between education and democracy. And there are moments when, like right now, when the political winds don't favor what's right for kids and what's right for students. And I think that's when you have to lead or teach with conviction rather than convenience. And I think in our roles, I'll speak specifically for me, like in my role, I have the awesome responsibility to interrogate policies and ask whether it's something's a policy, whether it's a practice or a precedent. All three can be changed. They can all three be impacted differently, but you can definitely impact them. And that's something that I didn't realize until I became, a district leader, that these things that we call policies that we feel like are written in stone, they can actually be informed. They can be interrogated. They
Hmm.
can be
Hmm.
changed to respond and react to the political winds that may do damage to our students and our institution. And I've seen a lot of that happen. I've seen a lot of that happen for good. I've seen a lot of that happen for not so good. I would say that we are leaning towards the side of good here in Oceanside, and I have a lot of colleagues who lead districts across the U.S. who are doing so as well. So I'm encouraged by them. But I feel like my job is to um, create the conditions for others to keep doing what's right. Whether
Hmm.
it's teachers who are teaching truth, or folks at school sites that are ensuring equity and access, and helping young people see themselves as something bigger than this moment that we're currently in.
I love that. Jordy, you got me thinking about a couple things. One is a button that we have around here. I forgot. I think some of my buttons got taken, and people, they take my buttons. But we have a button around here that was teaching banned books, like
Yeah,
not
Yeah.
afraid to teach books that are on people's list. The
right.
other one is this poem. This sort of, it's a phrase, but it's out of a larger poem, often attributed to a Neonine. And so you got me thinking, and Cheryl's got me thinking. The passage goes, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud
Yes.
was more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
Yes.
Just reminds us that it's going to be a risk, but it's if we allow ourselves to blossom in this uncertain moment, and to lean into the things that both Jordy and Cheryl are speaking to, that we'll realize our blossom was worth it,
Right. Right.
Mm,
Yeah. The
and
element of
our work
freedom.
was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I mean, there's with all of our efforts, we've come a long way in education and recognizing, for instance, that we need culturally responsive teaching, that um, it matters, that a teacher has good relationships with the students that she's teaching.
Mm-hmm.
We've come a long way in understanding that environmental factors, for instance, impact learning, right? I mean, we have had research for decades around these things, and we've sort of taken it for granted that everyone believed like we did. And I think the only thing I would change in all of our efforts around issues of culturally responsive teaching and education is that we fail to teach students and educators that there will be resistance to what we are doing,
Yeah,
right? What are you going to do when it's your moment that you're going to have to stand up and say, for the way that we're educating students now?
Yeah.
And I think back to all the many many courses that I've taught around culturally responsive counseling and mental health. That's my area. So taught thousands of classes in which but I never taught advocacy or leadership in the face of resistance from others, right?
Mm.
And I wish I could go back and say, so maybe this is what, the notion of courage and fear.
Uh-huh.
And I wish I had spent
So
more time on that,
if
right?
you could go back, what advice would you give?
That
Would you give those
there will
students?
be a backlash. If we get this right, some folks aren't going to like that,
Mm.
right? If we really address equity, you better be, I mean, history has told us, I mean, has shown us this over and over time, over and over again. If we really are good at creating a leveled playing field, that opening the doors for historically oppressed groups, if we open doors and give more opportunity, that would be might be perceived as disruptive and wrong, and there could be a backlash. I think history would have gives us all the clues that that would likely happen, and now we're seeing it. What we were not prepared for, I think, is, so what do we do when that happens? I think we're figuring it out more now. We're talking about courage and fear,
Mhm.
standing up. Um, Advocacy is huge, but what are the skills around advocacy, policy, change, all of those things that I think that are so needed, in addition to understanding um, pedagogy, for instance, that's related to culturally responsive teaching. There's an entire, and our ancestors, people that came before us, understood this.
Yeah.
Um, when you're talking about Mary McLeod Bethune and others who um, understood what we were trying to do, but they did it in the face of all of the hate and
Mhm.
the backlash of how dare you teach Black students to read, right?
Right,
What
right,
we
So, so
you
we just have to bring that back. I think that's the.
right. What's
So if
what's
I regret that I didn't teach enough about that.
no,
yeah, Rodney,
but you've laid the
Jordy, please, your
foundation.
advice.
But you've laid the foundation, Cheryl. I mean, one of the things in Jordy, you get a good sense that we have a good relationship here and we feed off one another. But one of the things that I I know quite well based on this conversation and why the need for big ideas and what big ideas in the history is that these moments, whatever that poem is and that saying that goes, and they didn't know we were seeds. What I realize mostly is that these are becoming lesson plans for how we do work at another generation, right? I don't
Yes.
have all the data and all the know, but I'll
Yeah.
just say one example is I'm involved in my fraternity's achievement week, and we're coming up. Our purple and gold is coming up in a week, and as part of our achievement week essay, we're asking students to dissect the DOJ ruling at UVA and write a letter to the board of visitors and the president in response to it on the need for affinity programs. Like
Yeah.
this is but a lesson plan for how to figure these things out and training our young people to think about these things for the future.
Yeah. Because
Needed.
more is to come.
More.
If we keep going in the right direction and doing the right thing, more is to come.
Mm,
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
mhm.
Just
Absolutely.
just so yeah, I love
And
that.
advocacy for communities too. I mean, parents and guardians and caregivers who are also often left out of the educational process, and um, helping them feel empowered enough to do the same thing, I think is also important.
Right.
I heard
Yes.
from one of my mentee, young African American um, freshmen. I've got a small group that I'm mentoring. That their mothers have a their mothers. These mothers of Black kids at AU have developed their own individual collective network of resilience. They form themselves. They got like maybe they're developing a website, Instagram on how to support their children at school. Like people aren't waiting. Folk are not waiting for permission. And I think we see the affront enough to realize, okay, that's but one lever that's not going to support. Well, there are other levers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Jordy, before we close out, any advice? What advice would you give to the leadership, to teachers
Yeah.
who are pushing this forward and experiencing that pushback that Cheryl talked about?
Yeah.
Before we close out.
I mean, I just this idea of like things being tested. Like I look at you have ideas and you have values. If you have ideas and you get tested, a lot of times they don't stay around. If you have ideas and they get tested and they stay around, I actually believe that they become values. And
Mm,
so, to me, I'm asking people to pay attention to what ideas that they have that are being tested, what's being like, where are you getting pushback, where are you getting challenged, because those are the things that are most likely core values. And so, whatever stays on the other side of something being tested, that's a value to me. So, really figure out what those are and understand, to what everybody said here, like you're going to be tested, you're going to get pushback. It's probably going to get harder before it gets easier. And I'm not even sure we're asking for easy. I think it's just a matter of us figuring out what's really important to us. But I also would say that this notion of like an ally versus like a co-conspirator comes to mind, and I'm thinking about this talk that Dr. Bettina Love gave a few years back, where she used this line where she said, "You got to put something on the line," and she was distinguishing between being an ally and being a co-conspirator, where ally is like knowledgeable and you might show up, but you're not
Mhm.
necessarily action oriented. And so
Mhm.
she talks about, I'm not going to spoil the whole clip because if you haven't seen it, you got to go Google Katina Love,
Check it out.
co-conspirator, look it up because it's worth it. And but she talks about a co-conspirator being someone who is more action oriented and is willing to put something on the line. And so that's just something I encourage all of us to do is when you're thinking about real issues of equity and access and justice, people have to move from being, you know, not racist to anti-racist, and you have to move from being an ally to a co-conspirator. And I think we have to be more action oriented with that nowadays.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, so to close this out, today reminded me that ideas alone don't move systems. Allyship ain't enough. We need you to be a co conspirator. People do, laying it on the line. Our challenge is to stay brave enough, courageous enough to keep dreaming big, even when the systems resist, because the future of education and democracy depends on the ideas we choose to fight for. So, with that, we will end every Big Ideas That Matter podcast with this question: what's the hope you're giving to the people? I need you to keep it cute and concise, about 30 seconds. We'll go back and throw it back to Jordy, and we'll go Cheryl, then Rodney, and then that'll be it for the day.
Right.
Jordy, what's
Yep.
the hope you're giving to the people?
Um, Ideas versus values and co-conspiratorship versus allyship. That's all I can say.
Yes. I love that. I have to print that out and put it somewhere. I
Love
love it. Cheryl, what's the hope that you're giving the people?
it. Gosh, we've been here before and we succeeded, and we'll be here again. We're doing it again, and we
Yes.
will succeed. It will get better. We'll be stronger on the other side of this moment.
Yes, we
I
have.
believe that.
Me too. Me too. And then finally, Pastor Rodney,
Okay.
what's the
So
hope you're giving the people?
I'll go with a verse from a poem. Even hope may seem but futile when with troubles you're beset, but remember you are facing just what other men or women have met. I think there's strength in realizing that we've been here before. There's strength in realizing that those pictures on our walls and
Yeah.
that grace our space, they build a certain resilience and reminder about what we're for. And it's community that helps us move forward. So thank you so much for making it happen. Thank you to those who've come. Thank you for the Big Ideas Reboot, Quay
Yeah.
and Anise, and to our guests, Dr. Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy and Dr. Jody Sparks. Thank you so much for being here. And send your students to AU, Jody. Let them know that
Right.
AU is.
Shameless plug. Shameless
Yeah.
plug.
Yeah.
Well, our time has come to an end. I thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists here. Thank you to our listeners for being a part of Big Ideas That Matter. Until next time, keep asking why this big idea now. We thank you.